Fabulous playing, Scott.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
beautiful. Those two iconic movements from Beethoven's piano sonatas. I mean, especially the Moonlight. Like everybody has heard
Hmm.
Moonlight Sonata,
Right.
and of course the beautiful slow movement from the Pathetique. It's just so nostalgic and it's just gorgeous. Well, I mean, I guess we could start by talking about Beethoven and the piano. I mean, a lot of composers played piano and were some type of pianist, but not many were quite as prolific at the piano as Beethoven. I mean, he got his start after all in Vienna, coming to town as a young upstart and started wowing people with his improvisation skills. And then he started writing these piano sonatas. Um, let's talk a little bit about his piano music and like what are your overall impressions as a pianist of playing Beethoven?
Sure. I think, any composer who's a pianist is going to be writing for the piano in kind of very specific ways that reflect, in a lot of ways, the way that they play.
Yeah,
And so it's interesting how we think of these compositional choices as kind of sort of coming down from above or something, and
right.
it's really a lot of it sort of comes out of the way that they approach the instrument. You were talking about Beethoven as an improviser, but I imagine Beethoven as a composer was similar in a lot of ways. Like this, where do the hands fall on the instrument? What sorts of uh, tricks does he know at the instrument, and what sorts of things come out when he sits down to play? And
Right.
I think that that plays into a lot of. I think there's that famous scene in Immortal Beloved of him playing the, playing the Moonlight Sonata and is sort of improvising it into the piece, and it seems like with Beethoven that it's very much like that. There's this sort of just kind of what's natural for him to sit down and do.
Yeah, like there's like this immediacy to the music as if it were being thought of at the moment. And
Right.
then
And whether or not that's something that is planned,
right.
which makes him such a great composer too, is he's able to write something as if, and it feels as if it were
Right.
improvised, even
Right.
if it's not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have all of these notebooks of his sketches
Right.
for the symphonic music, so we know that he really worked out the material and the themes and everything and the counterpoint to great extent. And um, I don't know. Do you know? I mean, was it the same for his piano music? I mean, did he, come up with an idea and then rework and work again and then finally put it on paper?
Oh,
Are there
sure. I mean, yeah.
notebooks?
I think the obvious thing about Beethoven that makes him such a great composer, he's just completely aware of all of the possibilities of what could happen in any moment in the piece, and like he knows how everything works. It's all, and regardless of what we've been saying about improvisation, it's all just so totally worked out. He knows what all of the implications are, and he of oh, well, if I use this note here, it these are all of my possibilities, and he always seems to kind of choose the right one.
Yeah. Well, and the instrument itself, the piano, in his time was developed to a great deal. And could you speak to that? Like, I mean,
Well,
the
sure. I
actual
mean,
instrument going
but
from the pianoforte to the
sure, because of, in many ways, because of Beethoven, his relationships with piano builders are pretty well known, and he was always pushing for, expanding the possibilities of the instrument, and so, and you can see that in the compositions as well.
yeah. It's always interesting to me when composers write a piece of music without any commission. Like they were not asked to write the symphony or the cantata or for any specific occasion or any, I guess, paying you know um, commissioner. And the Moonlight Sonata is one of those pieces. There's not any known commission. We know that he sort of dedicated it to a student of his, a female student of his. But I don't know. I always think that the works that are not without commission must have some special meaning or maybe a special purpose, for the composer to do something beyond the existence of a commission with or what the piece is for. Um, I don't know. I'm
Sure.
always
No,
fascinated by
it's
that.
very it's hard to say. I think that would be hard to kind of guess there at the the purpose or reasoning. I mean, obviously, it's a um, he made an interesting choice with that first movement. I think that that's kind of the big thing there. Is it, or is there really even a first movement?
Right.
It's almost missing a first movement. There's
Yeah.
we don't have um, the obvious um, sonata allegro type thing going on, and it's still it sort of works that way, but not in the traditional sense. And
Yeah.
like, what's the point there of putting a piece together in that way, and what was the point? I think the designation sonata quasi fantasia
Right.
gets us a little closer to something,
Right.
maybe.
Prepares us for something not normal.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Fantasy. Um, we were talking about earlier how Beethoven, came to Vienna and started to impress the music-loving nobility with his piano skills, and you know, there are all these testimonies of him engaging in these piano duels, where two pianists would sort of be in the same room, and a theme would be given for them to improvise upon. I mean, can you imagine being in the room when somebody like that sits down at the piano and just starts playing something as brilliant as one of these sonatas, just coming from them, flowing freely?
Sure. I mean, that expectation of improvisation is something really magical. Just the idea of something being completely extemporaneous is exciting for an audience,
Yeah.
and it's hard to know how much of that is planned, and how much is like how what does he kind of have in the bag of tricks that he can
Right.
sort of do that feels like it's improvising.
Right.
I think
Right.
in many ways like jazz improvisation, where it's not totally um off the cuff. I mean, you have to practice.
Right. You got your licks and your,
You have
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
that
Right.
how to use, but yeah, when I read about Beethoven as an improviser, I always wonder, we'll never know really what it was.
Right.
What really was that? The one extreme would be, well, maybe it's a completely planned out set of variations that's already, or
Right.
it's all completely worked out, or it's more like you hear like in the organ recitals, very similar kind of
Yeah.
audience gives a theme, and you play
Yeah.
this
Right.
thing, and you just sort of toss off some sort of
Yeah.
word.
Speaking
Yeah.
speaking of improvisation, I mean, you're a fabulous jazz pianist as well. And I mean, I've heard you play many times, improvising and playing with our combos, and even in the orchestra. Um, what's it? I mean, do you have to like switch your hats to go from your jazz chops to the classical chops? I know the technique is a little bit different, but I mean, is it challenging? Is it hard to go back and forth, or does it just come naturally?
Yeah, it's two very different things for me. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to get it to be closer to the same thing. I've been, doing classical music and it's been my focus for a really long time. So to me, that's more natural and kind of like automatic. It's something that I've had a lot of training with, and I know how to do. Whereas for me, jazz is. I mean, I've been, I guess, doing it for over 20 years, but still, it feels more new, and it feels like it's something I have to really, really think about in
Ah,
order to get through it. It's sort of, maybe it's sort of flipped for what people might think, but
yeah.
yeah, I feel like it's very different approaches, of course, too. But just personally for me, in terms of as a player, it's yeah, just very very different kinds of scenarios.
Yeah. So maybe one last thing to talk about. Um, most composers play some instrument or instruments, and obviously Beethoven's main instrument that he was, an innovator on was the piano. And I've always thought that, playing the piano sonatas of Beethoven or Chopin, or playing the the violin music of Izai or Sarasate. It's like you are as close to the composer's, you know, musical soul and form of expression as possible. It's not the same a Beethoven symphony as it is one of the sonatas where it's like this came so, I guess, uninhibited. There's no uninhibited. There's no well, can the instruments play these notes? Is it in the range of these instruments? I mean, it's just the most natural, comfortable thing for Beethoven to write for the piano or Chopin to write for the piano. Do you feel that sense? I mean, like when as a pianist and you play all kinds of repertoire, do you feel this like deeper connection to Beethoven through his piano music than say the symphonies or string quartets or any of his other works?
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, I think it's so direct. I mean, and I think that's unavoidable. Um, I think on the other hand, the other side of that is that you're trying to figure out how he played the piano,
Mm.
and so sometimes it doesn't feel like the way I play the piano.
Ah,
I think every composer. I guess I'm going this way with the question a little bit, but with every composer, there's a different level of whether or not it jives with the way I play. Like if I sit down and play Brahms, it just feels like I feel like my hands are the same shape, or something clicks there.
uh-huh.
With Beethoven, there's just always a lot of stuff that feels awkward and weird, like
Wow.
he wrote it on the bus or something. Like just there's so many things in there that feel like the way we would think that he would be approaching another instrument that he doesn't play. Things like they talk like with Beethoven and the voice, where there's things that just are uncomfortable. And
Yeah, right,
I mean, famously with the Ninth Symphony or something, just there's things in
right.
there that are just
Like screaming.
they're just yeah, or awkward intervallic shapes and things that just feel
Yeah,
weird. And
right.
I mean, I think you know, s- sure, it might have felt direct and natural and just what was the sorts of things that were coming out for him,
Uh-huh.
but that doesn't always translate as the player to is this like why did he choose that and how
Yeah,
not and it is Beethoven. So I think the primary thing is the composing and the I think the compositional choice is at the top. And so even with him, even with somebody who's a pianist, he I think he'll make the compositional choice over the easy pianistic choice, which isn't always the case with I think with other composers.
right. Any I guess parting words about Beethoven and um any favorite stories or any favorite pieces of his that you enjoy playing? Um just give us a little bit about, your love of Beethoven and what Beethoven's music means to you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think growing up, Beethoven's always sort of part of your uh, daily bread or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. It's part of what you're always playing a Beethoven sonata, and remember in school, like some of the sonatas I worked on are kind of seminal experiences for me, doing Waldstein or Les Adieux or whatever. Playing the triple concerto with Fayetteville Symphony a few years back was a great experience. I got to play with with
Fabian and Nate.
Fabian and Nate, and it was a really that was an exciting experience to get to do that. Just as maybe a funny story as a teacher, I felt like I finally made it as a teacher when I was no longer using my Beethoven sonatas as to elevate the kids in the seats. Like when I finally started getting to teach Beethoven sonatas,
Right.
I have a wonderful student now who's playing Opus 109, and it's such a great experience to be able to sort of just sit back and
Yeah.
experience all that music all over again as
Yeah.
as a teacher as
Pass it
well.
on to the next.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for passing on your beautiful performances to our audiences. Um, just gorgeous playing and incredible music. And we're so grateful for you being in this community and just so willing to, do pretty much anything we ask of you. It's like, Scott, You record some Beethoven sonata movements? Sure. Scott, will you come and play this jazz gig we got going on? Sure, no problem. I mean, we are very, very fortunate to have you in this community, and
Thank you.
we look forward to many more years of great music from your hands and your brilliant mind. So,
Thank you so
thank you
much,
very much.
Stefan. It's
All
great
right,
to work with
happy birthday, Beethoven.
you. Happy birthday, Beethoven. Right.
All right, thank you.